Now let's get started. I'd like to introduce my esteemed colleague, Professor Tom Kosnick. Professor Kosnick is a Fenwick and West consulting faculty member with the Stanford Technology Ventures program at the School of Engineering. He's an international advisor for the National University of Singapore Entrepreneurship Center. He also taught marketing at Harvard Business School from 1985 to 1989 and launched their entrepreneurial marketing course, which he taught from 1995 to 97. Tom helps leaders and teams in startups, global companies, and other organizations apply best-of-class tools to overcome real-world challenges. He has served as a leadership coach and advisor to hundreds of entrepreneurial leaders and teams from 1980 to the present in companies like Apple, China Mobile, HP, IBM, and Ernst & Young. You're in good hands with Tom today. So I'd like to now turn it over to Professor Kosnick, who will take us through our session today.
Thank you, Carissa, and welcome everybody. I'm really glad you're here. The thing that we're going to do today is to give you a glimpse at two of the tools that we will be using in the Build Winning Stakeholder Relationships course so that you'll have a concrete takeaway that you can use at the end of the session, but you also get a preview of one of the things that we'll be doing in the course when we come. So, how to earn the trust of a stakeholder. Here's what we're going to cover. You can read faster than I can talk, so if you'll just look quickly at those 5 major bullets and know that the key thing is about stakeholder, the trust spider and start, stop, keep, and we'll get right into it. The objective of this session is to introduce a trust spider as a tool that you can use to establish trust and diagnose problems that are eroding trust. And most project managers that I know are always thinking about how to build trust not only for themselves but for their teammates with the clients and the stakeholders that they are serving. And so the trust spider is a tool that you can use there. We're also going to introduce a second tool that we call Start, Stop, Keep, which is a way that you can find out if there's something eroding trust and then close the trust gap by creating very specific plans to change behavior, and we'll talk about that toward the end. So first, let's think about the stakeholders. At this point, as you look at the screen and you see that you're in the center as the project manager, surrounded by stakeholders of all types, ranging from your own project team to your manager, to middle and upper management, to a community that may have an interest in the project that you're doing, and that community could be inside your company or it could be outside the organization. There may be government entities involved. There may be some sort of public interest group that is either very much in favor or very much against the project that you're engaged in. If you're in a publicly traded company, you've got shareholders. If you're in a startup, you've got investors. And if you're in a nonprofit institution, you've got the people who donate and are really worried to make sure that you make good use of their funds as well. And then on the supplier side, you may have consultants working with you. You may have suppliers that provide you physical components if you're building a product, or they may provide you technology that allows you to run your project. Think of any person who's the customer or the client for the product or services you're offering as a client or the owner of the product or service. There may be other people who are not on your team, and there may be what we would call end users. And the difference between a client and an end user would be the client actually pays you for the project and finances it, and the end users would be anybody who's actually benefiting from what the project's about. So think about what stakeholders you're most concerned about now that are on this diagram, and if you have another stakeholder that's not there, I'd love to hear about it as we go into Q&A, and you could certainly add that to the slide. Here's a trust spider. I first developed this in the late 80s to early 90s with a large systems integrator, and we were training the project team managers that were leading very complex projects, and they ran into this problem of having multiple constituents, lots of people that they had to please, and they wanted to figure out a better way to establish trust and then maintain it through the course of the project and beyond. And we did a literature review and found the words that are on the trust spider as each of the at each of the spider legs, as well as integrity, which is in the center, are the qualities of leaders that a literature search and talking with a lot of people who are involved with projects said were important as qualities of someone who's going to work with someone, especially someone who's going to lead. You'll notice that integrity is in the center, and it's there because every source that we looked at and consulted said that honesty or integrity was foremost, and if you didn't have that, nothing else really mattered. So we put that really at the heart of the spider, and we put the other qualities around the side. Now, if you're interested in what we mean by any of these words that are around the spider, such as chemistry or sense of humor or competence, we have a bunch of definitions of the behaviors that would define that quality in the appendix. We're not going to go through them today, but you'll have them in the appendix after the session is done. Okay, so let's see, how do we use this trust spider? The first thing that you would do is look at the qualities and ask yourself, what are the 5 qualities that are most critical to earn my trust as a project leader or a program manager? And so just take a minute and start thinking about that, because we're actually going to ask you to do that later on in the time that we have together. All right, so which ones are important to you? And then you would tell your stakeholder that you'd like to meet with them and that you have a tool that you'd like to show them and share with them to understand how you all can work together and you can earn that stakeholder's trust. At that point, you show the stakeholder the tool and you talk to him or her about it a little bit, and you don't show them your qualities. What I've got here is me having done the exercise, and you can see that my top 5 are integrity, grace under pressure, chemistry, perspective, and cooperation commitment. Having done lots of projects and worked for longer than I care to mention, these are the things that are actually most important. Even reliability, which is terribly important to most people, that would probably be my 6th, but these other things are actually more important than that, which is different from what most people would say. But imagine you've done this and you've marked your top 5. You then come to your stakeholder, and when he or she reveals the top 5, you realize, whoops, and we have a typo on this slide, there should actually be a red bar by communication as well. I apologize for that. So imagine that you've got your stakeholders saying communication, confidence, fairness, reliability, and integrity. Those are her top 5. In fact, this is a real exercise that I did with a very important stakeholder, and when we saw the results, we both took a very deep breath and went, uh-oh, we only agree on one thing, integrity. Now you may ask yourself, why would we ever go to a stakeholder and get ourselves in this sort of trouble? Why would we do it? And here are the reasons. The first is that different people do have different priorities for what it takes to earn their trust, and you're never going to learn about those priorities unless you ask. So the tool gives a fairly straightforward way for your stakeholder to reveal something that otherwise would be very hard to get at. If you don't communicate priorities at the beginning of the project and you don't understand what your stakeholder really wants and values, there's likely to be conflict. There's likely to be, you'll never establish trust, or it may erode as you go through the project, which guarantees that the project will have troubles with that stakeholder. If you can discover the priorities early, you can also ask the stakeholder in that meeting, how can we best practice that quality? For example, if communication is really important, how do you like to be communicated with so my team and I can learn about that? And you can also say, what are examples of the things that would be a violation of that quality? What has someone done in the past that has eroded trust with you, that has just driven you crazy? And as I've used this tool and seen others use it over the years, stakeholders are very happy to tell you what they want, how they want it, and to bring up examples of things never to do. So it can be a very rich discussion. Make sure that you've got somebody ready to take notes. And then finally, if you're alone with the stakeholder, which is often the case, you can communicate with stakeholders' permission his or her priorities to the rest of your project team, so everybody's on the same page. So imagine that for every stakeholder, your entire team knows that different people need to be treated differently in order to earn their trust. The ability to actually build trust goes way up for everybody on the project. Now, we're going to do this for real. We'd like everybody to identify the 5 qualities that are most critical to earn your trust. I want you to do it right now by going to some voting that Carissa is going to do for you. Carissa, can you take control?
Yep, give me just 1 minute here.
Okay. So you don't know Carissa's, I hope you didn't see Carissa's values yet. The whole idea here is for you to do your own without being influenced by hers. Hopefully you weren't influenced by mine or by stakeholders. But at any rate, let's see where you go. Oh, wait, you can't. You know what? I've goofed this. I have goofed this. Everybody, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. As long as you've done...
So, Tom, what we'll do here is I'm just going to clear the results, if everyone can just
Yeah.
pause for 1 moment. And I'm going to clear the results. And please don't respond yet. So we're going to jump back to the slide we were on before, and I'll let Tom continue.
Okay. This is me getting so excited. Because actually you wouldn't know what the stakeholder was before you got into to see him or her, but I'm hoping that you have identified the qualities. Okay, so assuming you've done that, imagine that Carissa is your stakeholder, very important client, multi-million-dollar project, and you walk in and she fills out the form and presents it to you, and you see, aha, integrity, communication, confidence, cooperation, commitment, and entrepreneurship. Now, before we go any farther, vote now. And what we want to do is see, and Carissa will turn this back over to you, some of you may be a perfect match. Some of you may only have hit 4 out of 5 or 3 or 2 or 1 or none. And there's no right answer here, but what we want to do is get a distribution from you as to what some of those qualities are.
Yeah, so now please feel free to vote and see how similar you are with me. We'll share these results with you in a minute to see how close we are.
How much time do I have left? Seven. I have 21 minutes left.
Okay, so I think we're going to wait 2 more seconds for everyone to see, and then about 10 more seconds to before we close the polls, and now we're going to close the polls and share the results with you.
It's okay, I'm on mute. 24 minutes left.
Okay. So now the results are showing, and I'm going to turn it back to Tom.
Okay. Now, how do I get to my screen? There we go. So what's happening? Let me focus a little bit on this slide here. As you can see, only 8% of you had a perfect match, and 39%, 21% were, and 3% were 3, 2, or 1 out of 5, which is not unexpected. And what the key thing I want you to take away from this is, it's highly likely that you and your stakeholder are going to have different points of view, and that's good news if it happens, because you can quickly learn more about what that stakeholder means when he or she is talking about the qualities, and you can figure out a better way to earn his or her trust. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to do is think about this tool after you've already gotten your initial conversation with the stakeholder. Let's imagine it's 3 months later and you want to find out how you've been doing. You've got a major project milestone. So you bring back the spider, and with the spider in front of you, you ask the stakeholder, are there any issues that have to do with integrity? If there's anything that you think I'm doing that makes you question whether I'm being honest or whatever, or anybody on my project team, please tell me, because we really want to deal with that. And should there be something, focus on that, and it may be that you don't do anything but that, because integrity issues are absolutely critical to a project. Assuming that the stakeholder says, no integrity issues, you ask the stakeholder to draw lines on the spider connecting the dots on the spider scale that gives an assessment of his or her performance. We're going to show you an example of that in just a minute. But imagine that they're basically saying, okay, I think you're a 3 out of 5 on communication, and I think you're a 2 out of 5 on entrepreneurship. They would connect those dots with a line. And you, by the way, have filled out your own self-assessment separately before going into the meeting, okay? Preferably with a different color ink or something. Once again, you compare notes, and we're going to show you the example in just a moment. And what you want to do, knowing that there will be gaps where you think you're doing better than your stakeholder does, that's what we call a trust gap, focus on 1 or 2 of them and figure out a way to change the situation so that you can rebuild trust and close the trust gap. And we're going to use the start, stop, keep as a tool to show you how to do that exact thing. So let's give an example here. It's Tom and his stakeholder once again, and it turns out as I'm preparing for the meeting, I'm saying, oh, I'm sorry, that's a stakeholder assessment. So the stakeholder is not very happy with communication. That's not very good. And not very happy with reliability. That's not very good. So those are probably 2 we really have to look at. And it turns out that I had a much better feeling about how I was doing than the stakeholder did. So you can see that, so what? Okay, here we have the 2 together, right? So the stakeholders are here in the dotted lines, and I'm in the dark solid line. I think I'm doing pretty darn well on communication, and she is really not happy with that. There's a smaller gap on reliability, but I would certainly want to close that gap as well, because that's a 2 out of 5, which signals a serious problem. It's not that we ignore competence and fairness, but to get focused, let's take communication as an example. So I turn to the stakeholder and say, my gosh, I had no idea that communication was such a problem. Tell me more about what I've been doing that has caused you concern. And here, let's use a tool to help us figure out what I need to do differently. Actually, yes. So at this point, you let the stakeholder just tell you a lot of the things that you've been doing that may have been driving him or her crazy. An example would be you're late for meetings. Another is I don't get enough information in between meetings to know how the project is going. Sometimes you communicate with somebody on my team without letting me know, and I really don't like to find out about that without having been told in advance. I don't mind you talking to other people on my team, but please CC me. All sorts of things that may be related to communication that are things that you can change. So imagine that you've made your list, and you say to the stakeholder, what are some specific things that I can do in the next 30 days, start doing that I'm not doing now, stop doing, things that are driving you crazy, or keep doing. If there's anything that I've been doing with respect to communications that has been good, please tell me about that so that I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I'd love to know also the impact on you of the problems of communication. So in the why box, what I'm going to do is take down the things that you tell me about why it's important that we start or stop or keep. And I'd like to share these things with my project team as well to make sure that they also don't wind up in situations where they create communications problems, if that's all right with you. The stakeholders, in my experience, have never resisted having you share the information with the project team because they really want everybody on the team to meet their needs in terms of establishing trust. So here's an example of a start, stop, keep that's been filled out. So the stakeholder is saying, look, call my cell or email me and email me. Do both if you think you're going to be late for a meeting. Because I may be away from email and I'd rather get a call or an SMS to my cell no matter where I am so that I can let other people in my organization who are in the meeting know. We may decide to start later, in which case they can stay in their offices and not waste time, or we may change our agenda and put you later on because we have other things we can cover. If we're left waiting for 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 minutes for you to get there and I don't know what's going on, it's really a problem and it ruins the productivity. So that's what I want you to do, and your teammates should do the same. You have a tendency, Tom, to interrupt me in the middle of what I'm saying, so please don't ever do that again. Don't interrupt me, because it makes me look less effective, and it makes my teammates look less effective, and it makes you and I less effective in communicating. If I'm trying to speak and you break in, I lose my chain of thought, and at the same time, other people on my team and yours are looking at me saying, she's pretty weak. She doesn't have much executive presence. She's letting him walk all over her. So do not interrupt me again. In fact, we've got to figure out some sort of a code so that you will know if you're starting to do it. And at that point, what I would say is, I actually have a tool for this. I have a little stone that says silence on it. And this is absolutely true. And I'll keep the silence stone. I'll give it to you whenever we're in a conversation. And if I ever start to talk, or if I even talk too long, you simply push the stone in my direction. And at that point, I have to stop talking until you nod and give me permission to start. It's actually a great way to keep a talkative person on a tight leash if you need to do that. Then in terms of the third of the start, stop, keep, she tells me that she really appreciates our project status meetings. This is something that we do sometimes in person, but often with a Skype call. And being up to date on all of the things that are going on is something that she really likes. And she wants to know if the project's on schedule. She also wants to know whether there are obstacles that my team is facing so that she can help us deal with them. She can champion us in her organization. Now, you may want to think about how you would do something like this with your own stakeholder. The way that I've done it here, we're picking one thing to start and one to stop and one to keep, because I found that making a long laundry list of 15 or 16 things to change makes it less likely that you're going to do any of them. But what I do with my stakeholder is say, let's make a long list of things that I can do that would change behavior in a way that would better earn your trust. Let's say we come up with a list of a dozen. I say, can we pick your top 3 for start, stop, keep that we do in the next 30 days? I'll be mindful of the others, but what I really want to do is nail this stuff down so that you see solid progress, and we can, within 3 months latest, we can have this thing resolved, and I hope that you'll be completely satisfied in terms of the way that we're working together. You can use 30 days. In this day and age, you can use a week for each one, or you can decide that you're going to put more than one thing in each cell. I'm happy to have you do any of those things. You can customize it to your wishes. But the key thing is to use this as a tool to help your stakeholder tell you what she or he wants you to do. And it's an amazing tool to then share with the rest of your team. They can learn from your experience and prevent them from doing something in the future that they might have done had they not had the learning from your experience. So, in a nutshell, you can use a trust fighter at the project start with any of your stakeholders. I would do this in my initial meetings with my client, and certainly if we've got other people in the client organization, I do it with my entire project team as well, and with any consultants that we have on the team, so that we know that we're aligned. I do ask stakeholders for examples of good and bad performance, and I'd encourage you to do that as well. It'll be amazing how many good concrete examples of good behavior and bad behavior you can accumulate over time and share with your project team as a rich database of things that work and things that don't. As I had mentioned, get your project team to do this trust spider and have them look for differences in the top 5 across the team. This will actually help your team to work more smoothly with each other and also with you. It's a great team building tool. And what you definitely want to do is communicate each of your stakeholders' top 5 priorities to your team. What you're going to wind up happening when you do that actually is, let's say you have 5 stakeholders and they have different sorts of top 5s. The team is going to have to wind up paying attention to everything on the spider, but they're going to pay attention with more emphasis with one stakeholder on certain 5 things than they will with another. And in a very strange way, it helps the team across the board to earn trust more rapidly and to retrieve or rebuild trust after it's been broken. It's critically important once you've done this thing to monitor performance. I think weekly is probably a little too often, but monthly is probably, you wouldn't want to do more than a month, and you'd certainly want to do it at major project milestones. And I would encourage not only you to do it with your stakeholders, but have the teammates do it with theirs, and also have the teammates do it with each other so that they can figure out how the team can work more clearly. Now, when I say have the teammates use the trust spider with their stakeholders, what you don't want is you and 11 teammates separately going to Carissa and asking her. So make sure that there's one point of intervention for the meeting, and you can have Carissa share with you what each member of your team has a problem with. That's easy to do, but you don't want 12 separate meetings. And then again, using the start, stop, keep, it's a very easy way for stakeholders to give you specific, concrete ideas on how you can change your behavior to close trust gaps and to build greater trust. I hate academic books that are long and tedious and are filled with tools that have never been tried and that are hard to use. I'm a project manager myself. I've been one for more years than I want to count. We'll just say since '78 when I was a systems integrator and a project manager, and these tools really work in the real world. So at this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions and make sure that we let you have a chance to interact with us about the tool and also any other general questions about SCPD. And by the way, the appendix is there. Will they get a copy of the document?
Yes, they will get a copy of the entire document.
That's great.
So what we'd like to do now is we have a number of questions that I'm going to ask Tom. And then what we'll also do is as you think of more questions during my segment of the presentation, we'll have another Q&A session at the end. So a couple of questions that I've heard, Tom. One is, it seems like a fairly high level of trust needs to exist to even be able to have this kind of a conversation with someone. How do you handle dealing with negative stakeholders?
Great question. What I would do, first of all, I don't think you need a high level of trust to introduce the tool. I introduce it to people on first meeting and say, I want to earn your trust. This is a way to help us do it. In that case, it can be kind of an icebreaker. And you can, in that case, you say, would you at least let me show it to you and see if you'd be willing to do the exercise with me? And then you do the exercise, and if they say, I'm not interested in you knowing that, you know you've got a stakeholder who's going to be secretive and maybe a problem. Let's imagine you've got a stakeholder that you're already in trouble with. What I would do there is jump immediately to diagnostic. And I would say, my gosh, I'm really sorry. First, if you take a moment to identify what you think are the biggest priority areas for you, your top 5 using the spider, tell me what those are. And then take a few moments and map my performance on the 1 to 5 scale to let me know how we've been doing across the entire spider, including integrity in the center. Make sure that you do talk to the stakeholder about the importance of integrity. And at the same time, you should always carry with you your current version of where you think you are in terms of your own self-assessment. When you see what the stakeholder has done, I don't even know that I bring out my self-assessment at that point. I probably wouldn't. I would note where the choices are low. I don't know whether can I move the slides back and forth? Okay, so let's imagine that the stakeholder's really cranky, and I'm trying to, let me get to that. Here we go. Where is it? I want the stakeholder. No. Okay. Sorry, guys. Here we go. That's what we want. Let's imagine that you've given the stakeholder the tool, and this is what he's done. Have a serious conversation about the top 5, but if you see that under humility that you're scoring a 1, I would definitely work on that as well. So you get a very comprehensive laundry list of the things that you need to change, and I would very gently ask whether the stakeholder would be willing to go through the start, stop, keep analysis to make sure that we have concrete things that you can do to get better. And if they agree, that is, again, but do the start, stop, keep around the horn. This is going to be a much longer exercise where you're going to be taking a lot of notes. But it is worth doing if you've got a stakeholder who's angry. And there's another thing, if they're angry enough or in enough conflict that they're yelling at you or in active confrontation, we have something called the dozen Ds, which we will be using in the stakeholder workshop that I don't have with me today. It's a way to reduce the conflict so that you can get to the point that you can introduce a stakeholder tool. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Tom.
And so the person who asked it, if in fact it didn't answer it, ping back.
Great. So another question we have here is, how would we practice sort of the silence scenario in a virtual project environment? We can set some meeting roles, but it's really difficult when project members are virtual. Can you talk a little bit about techniques you might use for virtual scenarios?
Oh, that's a great question, because we have that problem on our virtual team meetings all the time. What I would do is establish at the beginning of a project a code that everybody who's on the virtual meeting can use if they want someone who's talking to stop and take a breath. And what we've been doing on our project is just the word stop. And so the first one who says stop, often the person doesn't hear it and keeps on talking. But then what you do, let's say you have 4 people on the meeting and one's rambling along. One of you goes stop. The second goes stop, and you keep saying stop to where the person talking is having 3 teammates say stop, stop, stop. And so if you don't like the word stop because it's too forceful, you can use the word breathe or the word wait. So that's one way to do it. If you're using, in addition to voice, the way that we're doing now, if you have, say you have a Skype call and you can send each other messages, you can send the teammate who's rambling on a text message on Skype saying, please stop, you're not giving the client enough time to talk, or whatever it is. Or you could, if it's a project team member, you could say stop immediately, you're drowning out the client. So those are 2 ways, sending a text message and also vocally doing it, applying peer pressure. And the last thing there is take the person if somebody's sort of a repeat offender on this, I would definitely take them into a session and use a start, stop, keep with them and have them work through the way that they can change their behavior in virtual meetings. I think it's well worth it, and then you can check up after each meeting as to how they're doing. And that's a hard behavior change for somebody to make, but they can if they're given concrete guidance on how to do it and reinforcement, positive reinforcement when you say, gosh, you only interrupted 3 times this meeting and only talked too long twice, and that's half as much as you normally do. You'll get people to change. In most cases, you have some people who are unchangeable, but that's another issue.
Great. Actually, that answered another question, Tom, which is how do you recommend dealing with people that want to steal the show at every meeting? So you led right into that one. We have another great question here. So how do you do this with your team with whom you've worked with for over 10 years and have a lot of history?
I think it's fun as so let's say you have it's either a team that's working together really well with a lot of history, or it's a team that you've got some conflict with a lot of history. And in either case, bringing this into an established team can be a great exercise to help understand each other better for the next project or the next quarter or whatever. You say, hey, we've been together for a really long time. We've got some pretty important goals either for the next phase of the project or for the next time period. Let's go through an exercise to see if we can become more effective as a team in building trust with each other and also building trust with our stakeholders. And then you explain how it works, and you have people, fill things out separately and then compare around the room, and then have the team. The way that we've done this in the past, each team member would give say for me, if I had 10 team members, each of them would fill out a start, stop, keep for me. So I'd have 10, and I could compare them. And if it's one person who's complaining about something, and other people are saying keep that, it really works, that's a different story than if 4 or 5 out of the 10 are saying stop doing this, right? And so it's a really good way to do kind of a 360 around the team that's informal, that's not part of your whole performance appraisal process, and you can use it as a way to have it just among the team. So you have each person identify their top 5, share across the team so that everybody realizes what the differences are, have each team member do a start, stop, keep on each of his or her colleagues. And this you can't do, in 10 or 15 minutes. This is something that you might ask them to do over a couple of days and then submit them digitally so that they'll be anonymous. And then you put together the little deck that has the start, stop, keep. Each team member gets a little deck with his or her action items. So that's what I do.
Great. So I'm going to give my team a chance to continue to collect some content questions, and we'll come back to this in a few moments. As Tom alluded to, there's a number of slides in the PDF deck that Tom will not be discussing today, but we will provide those as part of an appendix, so you'll get those with the PDF.
Can we flash through them on the way to your part?
Yeah, absolutely, we can do that. Give me 2 seconds here. So start here. So you'll see there's several slides here with some behaviors that are attached.
Yeah, and basically for each of the qualities on the spider, these are things that have been built up by my asking lots of clients and stakeholders and lots of project leaders. So it hasn't been done by a scientific survey with thousands of respondents and all of that, but it's based on a lot of real-world experience. You can, by the way, add to this as your clients and sponsors and stakeholders come up with other things about what they mean by empathy or cooperation or whatever. And you can add spider legs. I didn't mention that, but you always ask the client or the stakeholder, is there another thing that's really important to earn your trust that we don't have on the spider? If so, let's add it. If there's something, so you can have a multi-legged spider. Don't hesitate to improvise on this to customize it for the needs of the various stakeholders.
Great. So we wanted to give you some information about how you can learn more from Tom. So at the Stanford Center for Professional Development, we've been delivering education to industry for over 40 years. So we have reasonable experience creating these educational programs to address the career-long learning needs of professionals, managers, project managers, and executives in industry. We at Stanford are pleased to be offering the Stanford Advanced Project Management Certificate Program for over 11 years with IP Solutions and in partnership with Professor Ray Levitt. We believe that the certificate is quite a unique offering because it blends the industry practical experience from experts at IP Solutions with the Stanford theory and research that you heard about from Tom today, resulting in a truly rigorous and advanced program. What we try to do in creating the program is offer courses via very flexible delivery options so that you can either come to Stanford's campus in March, June, or September. You can take courses online via streaming video at any time, 24/7, or through our partners at IP Solutions, and those can be delivered at your company work sites for cohorts of 20 or more. Let me give you a little bit of information about the certificate program itself. The program was created for leaders and managers who want to improve their ability to convert strategy into action through project, program, and portfolio management, and that of their organizations and teams. And we take a truly organizational perspective in the curriculum that focuses on operating in a global context and improving productivity and profitability. You'll see here that there are 3 required courses with converting strategy into action, mastering the project portfolio, and leadership for strategic execution. The program requires that you complete 6 courses, and so you'll see there's a number of electives that you can choose from, including the new course that we'll be offering in June called Build Winning Stakeholder Commitments, and that course is the one that Tom is the academic director of, and so you can hear more about some of his tools in that course. So here we have the calendar, and you'll see some dates for the March and June on-campus sessions, and when the core and elective courses are, as well as some pricing details. There's also the early registration discount if you sign up by January 31st for March courses, and May 1st for June courses, where you can save over $250 a course. And so now we'd like to just take a moment to conduct a poll here. If you could, we really appreciate your feedback on this. If you could just indicate your level of interest in the SAPM certificate program, I would really appreciate it. And we'll keep that open. So we really, truly appreciate your feedback on this, so thank you. And so with that, I'd like to come back and we'll do a few more questions. My team is able to gather some additional questions here.
Well, while you're looking at those, if any of you have taken a course called Leveraging Customer Relationships on campus with Catherine Barr as one of my teammates, I want to let you know that Catherine will be back for the new course that we're working on, as well as Lina Green, and we're going to bring some other folks in as well. So you're not going to be putting up with Kosnick as the only person there for the whole time. We'll have a talented colleague from IP Solutions as well. It's going to be fun.
Great. So here's another good question, Tom. So what if the stakeholder is a new stakeholder and is a customer that we've never met? How can they assess you in the first place?
No, you wouldn't. If it's a brand new stakeholder, all that you want to do in the first meeting is show them your top 5 and ask them about their top 5 priorities, and then ask them about the kind of behaviors from past project managers or past people that they've dealt with that would be an example of good practice or bad. And then if it's a first meeting, I'd say, look, can we meet again at a reasonable time frame? Maybe in 30 days if you're going to be working fairly closely with that person, or 60, whatever the number of days is that you think appropriate. Or you could ask the stakeholder, I'd like to meet with you again after we've been working together a while to see how on doing in terms of earning your trust. When would be best to schedule that meeting? And that way the stakeholder can say, okay, I want it in 2 weeks, or I want it in 6 weeks, or I want it in a month. And you have automatically locked in an agreement to get feedback on how you're doing in terms of trust building in that first meeting. They don't have to know anything about you in order to do the first exercise.
Great. So another question here. So how do you filter out when a stakeholder is communicating what they think you want to hear rather than what they really think so that you get good feedback?
So one thing I do is to say, can you tell me more about why you picked those 5 as your top 5? And let them elaborate on that a little bit. And then you can say, well, if I gave you the next 5, what would you pick? So that you can get other priorities. I think that in terms of them gaming the system, there's always a risk if you ask anybody to fill out any kind of a question or do any sort of a thing that they may game the system. And I think that the 2 things that I'm suggesting are certainly things that you can do to try to get underneath what may be going on. I can't think of another other than to ask why. Yeah, if it's a new stakeholder, I wouldn't say, gee, it looks like you're telling me, you're filling this out in a way that I want to hear it. So that would be too direct. So I think just asking them why the first 5 are so important, asking others that would be important, asking for behavior on the entire spider in terms of what are good behaviors and what are bad behaviors with respect to every item on the spider. Make sure that you know if they're telling you the truth about what to do and what not to do. You know how to handle any of the legs, and you know how to handle integrity. If, in fact, you think they're leading you down a path where they're telling you to do things that you know are going to get you in trouble with other stakeholders, what I would do then is go to a stakeholder in that organization that I trust and say, help me, I got some guidance from one of your colleagues that seems to be the opposite of what most clients want. And is the culture in your organization this way? Should we be behaving this way or not? And typically, if you've got somebody who's a difficult person to work for in a client organization, the others will help you to insulate yourself from him or her if you approach it properly.
Great. Well, so one final question. So everyone has an opinion. So if you're working on a team and you have, say, 10 different stakeholders that have 10 opinions, sometimes those opinions are really conflicting about trust. So do you recommend consolidating these ideas down into one model for everyone, or how would you approach that?
Well, you definitely want the team to see each individual stakeholder's top 5 because people are different. The problem of taking an average of all the stakeholders, if you do an average, you're going to get a very funny number. If you take the maximum of every stakeholder, you're going to get a perfect circle around the edge of the ring, most likely. In fact, the team wants to try to perform well on each one of these variables, but you want to particularly emphasize the top 5 of a particular stakeholder. So you do want the team to see everything, but you want to see the stakeholders one by one so that they know that you would treat Carissa differently from Robert or Tom or whoever. And it's I hope I've answered that clearly. Having those things available to the teammates and going back to them and say, okay, how are we doing with this stakeholder? Did they seem upset with us? If so, what do you think is going wrong on the trust spider? And let's get somebody in there who has the best relationship with that stakeholder to take his or her temperature and figure out what's going on.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom. I just want to note that this was really valuable, and I happen to be thinking about using the trust spider with my team. So this is great. So
could I?
Yeah.
One last story. This has been used by senior executives in very large companies and project teams all over it. Also, we used it with a pair of co-founders who were trying to decide whether to found a company or not. And they realized they were so different that they decided not to start the company. And they both have thanked me for it ever since. So sometimes you agree not to work together when you have the choice not to work together. That's not usually the case for project managers. Usually you have to do what you have to do. But anyway, back to Carissa.
That's great. That's a great story. So, this concludes today's webinar, but I want to assure you that there are still a number of questions in the queue, and we'll be sticking around to make sure all those questions get answered. Just as a reminder, you can print the PDF of the slides, and you will have those appendix items in there as well, just by selecting the Print to PDF option in the lower navigation bar. And please remember to look for an email that will be coming from Robert that will alert you when the webinar is available online. We'll get that out to you as soon as we can. And thanks again, and thanks again to Tom. We definitely appreciate the webinar. And I think Tom has one more comment.
Yeah, if any of you have another spider leg, another quality you think is really, really important, we would love to find that out, okay? Because we've been using this around the world. It's been fairly stable, but I am, in these changing times, we may need to add some dimensions. Okay? Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Tom.